For more on this, let's bring in Miranda Devine. Always interesting and always has answers. She's a columnist for the New York Post and the author of Laptop from Hell. Miranda, good to talk to you as always.
You too, Vince.
Okay, so this seems like a big one. What do we make of today's announcement?
Well, yeah, I think it is a big one. And look, it just shows the dividends that James Comer is getting from just basically following the money. This is just straight evidence that he's getting from subpoenaing banks. And look, they've still got a ways to go, but it flies in the face of Joe Biden's repeated insistence that he knew nothing about his son Hunter's overseas business dealings, that he had a wall between himself and Hunter and his businesses, that he knew nothing and had nothing to do with it. And if you notice that the defenses coming out of the White House and also out of the sort of dark money protection groups that have been set up to take care of this problem for Joe Biden, they've changed their tune. It started off with, Joe Biden had nothing to do with anything, and then it was Joe Biden didn't know about it, and then Joe Biden wasn't in business with his son, I think is the latest one. And so I think, look, these are monthly payments that James Comer has discovered that have gone from Hunter Biden's law firm, Owasco, his personal law firm. Owasco was the firm that was receiving a lot of the Chinese money, and other money from Burisma and so on would get filtered into that account as well. And so from that account, he's paying their money around $1,400 a month.
Yes.
And he's only, I think, shown us 3 payments. And, so you don't want to jump the gun on that, because they always have some sort of explanation. They say, it's a loan, or it's a loan repayment,
right,
or whatever. This is what they did with the $240,000 that was funneled through to Joe Biden from Jim Biden, his brother, who also was in that Chinese deal with Hunter.
Right, but the thing I think this highlights is, first and foremost, the lies, as you said from the outset, which is that Biden claimed that his son never made money from China. He said it on a debate stage. That was untrue. He definitely made money from China. He said he wasn't aware of his son's business dealings. He met on a routine basis with his son's business partners. They claim the defense. One of the defenses of Biden is he's never received any payments. There was no money that was sent directly to Joe Biden. Well, this is proof that there was money sent to Joe Biden. Now, in the interest of full disclosure and fairness to Biden, this could be, and this is the defense I'm already seeing Biden people making, at least people who support Biden, a payment for a Ford Raptor truck that Hunter Biden apparently had. A Ford Raptor is a souped up, very fast, very expensive version of the Ford F-150. And this appears to be in the same amount as the payment for that truck. But this, again, is a demonstration that was a lie, that Biden never received money from Hunter's business. He clearly is here.
Yes, that's right. And those numbers do seem to tally up with those payments. Now, whether or not that was a sort of an excuse for paying Joe Biden and it was just a clever way of wrapping it up, or whether it's legitimate, who knows. But what it does show is that there was mingling of their finances, that, that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and there are numerous examples of this that James Comer has found, but also that appear on the laptop, shared debit cards, shared bank accounts that were or a bank account that was operated by Eric Schwerin, one of Hunter Biden's business partners. And there was also evidence that Hunter was having to pay bills for maintenance and upkeep of Joe's, lavish Delaware estate, things like building retaining walls and painting and replacing shutters or replacing air conditioning. And those sort of bills, at least there is a little bit of evidence of that going on in the laptop, and I'm sure James Comer will get to the bottom of that as well. Yeah. Also, Hunter was paying for a phone bill of Joe Biden's. It wasn't an enormous amount of money, but, it all adds up. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. The monthly AT&T bill that Hunter was paying was $190. And remember that Hunter complained bitterly about having to give half his salary to Pop, he said to his daughter, Pop being Joe Biden, and having to pay for the bills of the family for all his life because he was basically seen as the guy who would go and get the job with on the overpaid salary with one of Joe Biden's donors, and then pay off, for instance, his own college loans as well as his brother's. These were all bills that Joe Biden didn't have to pay that normally fathers would have to pay or would be expected to pay. So Joe Biden was able to spend every penny of his salary on himself, while Hunter Biden picked up the bills.
Yeah. You know, one of the maddening things, I'm sure this is the case for you too, Miranda, is like every time I hear somebody in the media say that there's no evidence that implicates Joe Biden in any of this, it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts because it seems to me that there's a mountain of evidence in front of us. I think about, you know, all the work that Hunter Biden, all the relationships, the business relationships that the Bidens had in China, and that the money didn't start flowing until immediately after the Biden presidency had concluded. And that was, and inside of all of these communications, they're open about, they're doing this as gratitude for what we did. Oh, we weren't allowed to be paid before because it would be a conflict of interest. Well, if they're paying the Bidens for all of the work that they did for Chinese interests during Biden's vice presidency, it's clear that was the arrangement, and that's a massive conflict of interest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's worse than a conflict of interest. This is bribery. And, you know, it's well known, it's not just in America, but around the world, that payment of the families of high government officials accounts as bribery of the government official. You don't have to find direct payments to Joe Biden. There's enough evidence that these payments were bribes paid by foreign nationals, particularly our adversaries, to Hunter Biden and Jim Biden in some cases,
right,
in order to extract favors from the very powerful man who was Hunter's father, who was Joe Biden, yes, particularly in Ukraine. I mean, you talk about being frustrated about the media. I'm just about to send a tweet just countering these ridiculous argument that Jake Tapper from CNN made when he was interviewing poor old Jim Jordan the other day. I mean, Jim Jordan couldn't get a word in edgeways because Jake Tapper, who sort of likes to think of himself and portrays himself as a kind of a straight shooter and a guy, proper journalist who just based on the facts, he's hysterical and practically yelling at Jim Jordan and saying it's not true that Victor Shokin, the prosecutor who was ordered fired by Joe Biden, was investigating corruption. He says Joe Biden was trying to get a prosecutor who was not pursuing corruption fired. It's the fact. Well, it's not a fact. Victor Shokin was conducting an active investigation into Burisma, which was the company that was paying Hunter Biden $1 million a year when he was fired.
In fact,
he had just seized all their property. Yeah.
In fact, Miranda, my memory is that the Obama State Department had issued a number of memos indicating that they were happy with the progress of Shokin's pursuit of corruption.
Absolutely. In fact, Shokin has a letter that he was sent by Victoria Newland on behalf of John Kerry, the Secretary of State, saying what a great job he was doing. They were all very happy, and he'd made all the reforms he'd been asked for. But the problem was he was pursuing aggressively this investigation against Burisma. And his next step after seizing all of the owners' properties in Kiev was to interview Hunter Biden and Devon Archer and other of the Western members of the Burisma board that had been installed just weeks after the UK started targeting Zlochevsky's ill-gotten gains.
Right. Now, one other piece here that I've been thinking a lot about, which is the defense here is always that, well, Biden was merely carrying out U.S. policy. Victor Shokin's firing was a product of U.S. policy. But I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Ukraine in Joe Biden's portfolio? In other words, the vice president of the United States at the time was in charge of what our policy towards that country was.
He certainly was. And while there is evidence that the advice on Shokin did change before Joe Biden went there and ordered that he be fired, it was shifting, but there was certainly, it was freelancing. This is proven, freelancing by Joe to say that he was going to make the $1 billion in US aid contingent. And that was what flipped the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, over the line and forced his hand. And he had to then tell Shokin to resign. But also, it's really a mirage. Jake Tapper mentions this, that the, quote, entire West was pushing for Shokin's removal. The interesting thing is when you read the contemporaneous articles, like in the Washington Post in particular, about Shokin's firing, they all have anonymous quotes saying that the investigation into Burisma was dormant and that Shokin was corrupt. No one ever has any evidence that Shokin was corrupt. To this day, there's no evidence of corruption. And what's more, when you actually go and track down, as I have done, and interview the European officials,
yes,
who, the few of them that have been quoted on the record, they say, oh, no, we had nothing to do with Shokin. I left anything like that up to the Ukrainians. I was just upset because they'd taken so long to get the money back from the previous Yanukovych kleptocracy. They'd taken so long to get those assets back. Well, that wasn't Shokin's fault. Shokin was actively doing that. And in fact, Shokin was involved in the only repatriation of those stolen assets, $1.5 billion, that came in after he was fired.
Yes.
And the other aspect of this is that his successor, a guy called Lutsenko, who was handpicked and who Joe Biden called a solid choice, he dropped all the investigations against Burisma within months. So Burisma was off the hook, paid a $7 million fine, which was chicken feed, and Zlochevsky was free, the owner was free to come and go as he chose, and Hunter Biden continued to be paid. Although, interestingly, a couple of months after, or a few weeks after Joe Biden was no longer vice president, Hunter Biden's pay from Burisma was cut in half.
Of course. That's the way it always... just ask the Clinton Global Initiative. That's how it works. You know, you lose the money when you don't have power anymore. Finally, on that question, I've been wondering as well about Barack Obama. Why hasn't Obama spoken up in Biden's defense if this was all consistent with the Obama administration's position?
Very good question. Look, I mean, it's extraordinary that the Obama administration didn't do something about it. You see little tantalizing clues in the laptop about how the White House counsel intervenes and tells Joe Biden, don't do this or do that. Like, for instance, take down a photograph that Burisma had put up on its website of Hunter Biden after he joined the board. That was a frantic thing that came from the White House counsel. And also...
Why? He's a private citizen. He's allowed to do whatever he wants, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. So much. But, you know, there's an ethics czar, I can't remember his name, Walter something or other, who's quite vocal now about, oh, this is outrageous. He was the ethics czar during the Obama administration and did not say a word. Walter Schaub, I think his name.
Yes.
And, yeah, and you know, I mean, it's such a worm-like thing to do, to, like, protest now when you did nothing when you had the job. But obviously there were warning bells going off. I mean, there were stories even in the New York Times about Hunter being on the Burisma board and this being a big problem. Why Obama didn't step in and stop it is, you know, it says a lot about his own morality and ethics.
You know, we had like primetime hearings on the January 6th nonsense. Imagine if the House Republicans actually did something and just presented this evidence to the American people in primetime. I mean, that would be like way more worthwhile than the January 6th garbage. It's amazing. Miranda,
yeah, but look,
go ahead.
It's harder than it looks. You know, I mean, I think James Comer's pursuing the correct path, and we're going to hear from the IRS whistleblowers who have provided so much documentary evidence. We're going to hear from them again tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. If there was no crime, why was there so much effort put into the cover-up? It's you know,
yeah,
amazing. Miranda Devine, thank you very much again from the New York Post for all of your excellent work. Always nice talking to you.